Holy shit. Hold up. Hold up. He's on his kicks right now.
Greetings, this is Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. I'm getting mauled by the skeeters here. So, what you just saw previous to me is enhanced and then stabilized video of, the anonymous video sent in. I've been waiting to hear context of the backstory. I've only gotten a couple of blips of information. It was blonde haired in appearance with black skin, and it appeared to be roughly 10 foot tall, about half as wide, 5 foot wide. It was reaching down. Someone thought it was picking up sticks. Another person said that it was plucking roots. Who knows? But what concerns me is the fact that it was broad daylight and this thing didn't give a flying rat's patootie. So, I mean, I've watched that several times, just watching it move its arms and articulate its hands together. It was doing something. Who knows? Anyway, so what I wanted to share with you today, it comes from Ian. Now, the the bush pilot Doug got me in touch with Ian. This is one of his friends. I'm still waiting to hear back from Doug as far as his continuation on stuff he was dealing with as a bush pilot. But so Ian, back in, it was 1983. Him and his buddy, we'll just call him his buddy. His buddy had. Sorry, I got mosquitoes flying all around me. So his buddy had this idea of checking out old washouts from rivers as far as gold panning, right? Not an uncommon thing, not a new idea, and definitely one worth checking out. So what they ended up doing is his friend did a little research with someone else in state. Ian's from out of state. So when he comes up, this culture shock, of course, they gather up some supplies, and then he's told, we're going up to Reindeer River, right? And so he's like, Reindeer River, he thought it was, some kind of hokey shit, which, hey, if you haven't been here, of course, some of the names would throw you off. But so he heads on upriver. They flew in. So they had to take a Tundra plane, a Super Cub on big Tundra tires. So Ian's buddy flew out first because that's the arrangements his friend made. And so by the time Ian landed there, a day had passed because once his friend got dropped off, the weather turned and they couldn't make it back out that same day. So the following day, he's back. His friend's quasi got one of the little cabins there set up. Now, as they were sitting there discussing their game plan, way off in the distance to the west, it sounded like it was across the river from them, they heard a howl, right? And they just thought it was maybe an injured wolf, maybe got run out the pack or something, Yeah, they just didn't know. Chalked it up to nothing. So they were weathered in for approximately 2 days after Ian got there. So almost 4 days has gone by since they've been on the scene, right? And every night, going on to dusk, this occurred roughly around this time of year. So saying night is kind of a misnomer. It gets darker because right now sun rises at 4:28 and sun sets at 11:28 p.m. So anyway, and plus they were further north, so it's probably a little augmented. Anyway, so they would hear these noises every night coming from across the river, and he didn't pay attention to the time because he was just awestruck by the land of the midnight sun, you know what I mean? And when I was talking to Ian, he said there was one thing that really stood out was the energy, and I found it fascinating. He was the first one I've spoken to from out of state that brought up this energy, because it's a totally different feel up here, and I live here, you know what I mean? And I mean, just the other day, me and Squatch Bait, I have some more footage coming out when we went to the Little Susitna River. We're coming up this little ridge, and there was a definite energy change. As soon as we got up towards the top, the energy was different. It was really different. Yeah, I'm over here. Ravens are telling on me. Might be my ancestors. Yeah, I'm right here. Yeah. Anyway, so energy was different. And so morning of day 5, they head out, and I'll show on the map. The yellow dots are going to be their path that they went across the tundra to make it over to these old washouts off the Reindeer River, right? Now, as they go along, they're hours into this. You got to understand, they were, you know, traversing swamp and shit. Shut up. Yeah. The threat's right over here. Yeesh. So, there's a raven circling that's just unhappy. Yeah. Chamai. Wow, that's crazy. It's just circling around me. Alright, anyway, damn ravens got me paranoid. So, they're hours into this, traversing across the marsh. You know, they picked their route or whatever, and they checked a few of the first little spillways that they come across, and they weren't seeing anything promising after, you know, a couple feet, digging down a couple feet. Now they're walking along, they're armed for bear. Ian had a shotgun, his buddy had a 30-06, and his buddy also had a 44 Magnum, one of those old school ones with the 9.5-inch barrel. And so as damn, mosquitoes biting my face. Jeez, I don't like that. But anyways, okay, it flew away. Anyway, so they're moving along, and they would dig down, and within a couple feet, if they weren't coming across the kind of his buddy was the expert. If they weren't coming across any material that looked promising, they moved to another spot and do another little quick check, you know, digging a hole. And Ian stated that during this time, he kept feeling this weird sensation. He couldn't pinpoint it in that moment, right? But he figured it out a little further along, that he felt like they were being watched. And he said he didn't realize how bad it was as far as these feelings he was having until they got to just before this thing showed itself, right? So he said he was standing there, and he dug some material into a bucket, and what his friend was doing was carrying a bucket full of water. I don't know how, why, whatever, but his friend was reusing this water, looking for signs of nugget, any signs of gold. It was just preliminary. He wasn't trying to fully wash it out or anything. He was just checking, right? So, and don't ask me what the mining regulations are up there. It's whatever. I don't know. That's just what they were doing. But he said his attention kept getting drawn right across this old washout from the river, and he said this brush, he just couldn't stop looking over at this brush. And he set his bucket down, and he unslung the shotgun because he just kept getting this sensation of being watched. His friend was doing some washing in this with a small little modified pan that he had trimmed off a bunch of the edge, just to kind of do a little quick test, you know, to see if there's any glints or any flakes or any nuggets or whatever. He said he glanced down at his buddy momentarily, then looked back up and saw a dark figure lower down. And he said it startled the bejesus out of him. He said he stumbled back, he pointed the gun in that direction and said, hey bear, hey bear, just started yelling, hey bear, per instructions he was given by his buddy. His buddy told him, you see anything strange, just start hollering out, hey bear, because there's grizzlies around, you know what I mean? And grizzlies are not to be toyed with. You know, the coastal brown bears, they get all their salmon in the river. They don't have to really fight for much. The grizzly bears do. They're the same exact bear, they're just a little smaller because they don't get that protein, and they're a lot more aggressive. You don't want to come across a hungry grizzly bear. So this thing popped up, goes down, and Ian said that no sooner than he gets his friend's attention and starts saying, hey bear, his friend stands up and is looking off to the left-hand side from where he saw this thing. So Ian's initial focus was right in front of him where he initially saw this thing pop up and go down. His friend, Raven, is just telling on me, he's over here. So his friend is looking off to the left. Ian's sole focus is right where he had last seen this thing. Unbeknownst to him, it had moved off to the left. And when it did, his friend saw it, just the top of it going through the brush. That's what caught his attention. So he slings his rifle up to his shoulder and starts yelling, hey bear. Now, at this moment, his friend moves forward excitedly and knocks over his water bucket, right? That was right between his feet because of, shit. So when he does that, he stops. He looks down and he's adjusting. He's standing that bucket up, right? As he does so, all of a sudden, one of the pieces of brush from over there comes flying kind of like a lawn dart, right? Just kind of high arc. And Ian said he saw this thing stand and just kind of just lackadaisically just go like this number, but this thing came flying up, and it wasn't of any threat really. It was more, I mean, you had a water roots and a freaking a single piece of the willow, and so, or the alder. And so he said when it arced up and it came down, boom, it hit about 6 feet in front of him roughly. And his friend was like, it's throwing stuff, we got to start shooting. And Ian's like, no, don't shoot. It hasn't done anything. What are we doing? Bears don't throw stuff. So that's what he was focused on, is that bears don't throw. And his friend goes, I don't know what the hell's going on. It could have kicked it at us. And at this distance, this thing is about 55 yards away. This thing a bear isn't kicking brush that far, right? So as his buddy's kind of quasi freaking out because he doesn't know what to do. He's never experienced anything like that. They decide, well, we'll just get out of here, That's fair enough. So they start following their tracks back because going across that marshy area, they had the only route that they could figure out because it took them hours to navigate and get through that shit, right? So they knew they had to go back that direction as quickly as possible in those conditions to get back to the cabin. Ian said that they weren't looking back often, which I don't understand that, but hey, whatever, it's just what happened. They were more focused on let's get the hell out of here. He said, however, he was listening and he was hearing movement here and there, and it seemed to be coming from all around him, right? And he couldn't understand how this bear was doing that. How is this bear sounding like it's over here 1 second, then over here the next second, and then so he was really getting freaked out. His friend had left the buckets and everything where they were, and said, let's just get moving with our guns and stuff. I don't know what's going on. So his buddy's behind him, and about half the distance on their way back up those yellow dots, just before they started traversing back across the tundra, his buddy, all of a sudden, Ian's back is to his friend. He's focusing on the trail and trying to remember the way they came, right? Because they were blazing trail when they could, and they were hanging up marker tape as they came through. So anytime they came into an opening, they would turn around, tie off markers so they would know their trail was that direction. So they did it right. But he's, focusing on that, and all of a sudden, bam, bam, 2 gunshots back to back. Startled the shit out of Ian. He swivels around and looks, and all he sees is brush moving off to his right hand side. So when he turns around, it would have been off to his left when he's walking towards the trail, or back trail. And he turns around, it's off to his right, and he said he saw the brush just doing this number, just busting out. And then he said it got a couple 100 yards away real fast, and all of a sudden just this bellowing scream comes out. He said it started low, ended high pitched, pretty standard. He said when that happened, every hair on his body stood up, and immediately he said, "Run," right? Ian said this to his friend, "Run." So they turn around and he starts hauling. He busts through the brush where they had the marker tape. He said once he got through the brush, he realized he had run further off to the left versus the right. So he had to adjust. When he came out of the brush, he had to adjust, and he was about maybe 75 feet off of their original trail that he had to turn and compensate and start running to the right. He said when that happened and he turned and started running to the right, because now all the brush is on his right hand side, his buddy's right behind him, and he saw the brush moving, and he immediately stopped and raised the rifle, and it dawned on him, oh, the wind's blowing. The wind was blowing the brush. Anyone who's been up here knows what I'm talking about. When the alders and willows get blown, it looks like waves in the ocean, So immediately he has this little sigh of relief. Ian said he continued. He found their original trail because the tundra was, kicked up and stuff. And it's something his buddy told him to do every once in a while, kick the tundra. So when we look back, we can see the kicked up tundra trail. So he found, their trail in, and he stopped there and he was catching his breath because he was really freaking out. And he turns and looks over at the brush, and he said he saw a face in the brush. He said it was roughly the size of a small beach ball in appearance and size. It was about 40 feet away, roughly 35, 40 feet. And it was this face, this dark face in the midst of all this green, right? So it was just a big dark spot. And he said the eyes were all black. And when the eyes, he could tell it was moving around because of the glint from the daylight. Saw the eyes looking around, and he said it looked curious. It looked like it was trying to, problem solve or something. Those are his words. And so immediately he's pointing that shotgun, and that's when the thing disappeared into the brush. So they take off again, and they get across the marsh. They look back across. They don't see anything following them, nothing like that. And they calm down. They make it back to the cabin. And when he was sitting there talking to his buddy, because they still had, I believe it was almost 8 days left on this trip before anyone came back looking for him, right? The buddy that dropped him off said when he's in the area, he'll stop and check on him. But, that's neither here nor there. So when they're back at the cabin, Ian's very... he wants out of there. He feels the whole thing is a bust. He doesn't want to continue. He's definitely not going back across to Pan. He told his buddy, nah, whatever is going on over there, I want no part of it. It obviously wants no part of us, wants us out of there. I'm not going back. His buddy's like, look, there's got to be gold there. And he's at that moment, he was kind of, Ian said he was fed up with his buddies, get rich quick kind of fucking thinking. And he was like, nah, it's not worth my life. It's not worth yours. There's other places we can go look for gold, but I'm done with this. So let's figure out how we're going to get out of here. So they literally had to sit there for that entire time. Now, what stands out to Ian is they were being stalked even at the cabin. Now, he said what had happened is 2 nights later, and he's on vigilant. Every time he's constantly looking around. He said he was so restless, he barely got sleep. Any little noise or creak or squeak or gust of wind, he was looking. He was hyper paranoid. Those are his words. So he said when he realized they were being stalked at the cabin was early one morning. He wasn't able to sleep. His buddy smoked and Ian didn't, but Ian took one of his cigarettes, went outside, lit up a cigarette, right? He said, don't ask me why. I just went and smoked a cigarette. He was standing there hacking up a lung, stressed out, saying, oh God, this is nasty, because his buddy smoked menthols, and Ian had quit years prior, but stressed out or whatever, he wanted a cigarette. So he's suffering through this menthol. And he said as he hacked, he thought he was getting his own echo back, because it was the same cough and everything, same inflection, all of it. It was identical to his cough. He thought it was just echoing off the brush a little ways away and coming back. He said he was just about done with that cigarette, and his friend had one of these little small cans as a butt can, right? And he was looking for that butt can because it was right near the front of the cabin. It was always moved around because his friend would carry it with him and smoke, and when he was done, he would just set it down, right? So he's looking for this can, and Ian said off to his immediate left, just straight off his shoulder, he had coughed just as he was when he found the can. He coughed and dropped the cigarette into this can, and he heard the cough come right back, and it was like 20 feet away, right? So he turns and looks, and there's that face in the brush, and then it stands up. And he said when it stood up, but it was still rising as he turned. He didn't even fully see how tall this thing was, because he was already in the motion of getting back inside the cabin. So when he got back inside the cabin, he was expecting this thing to bum rush the cabin or something, right? And he's yelling at his friend, "It's outside, it's outside, it's right outside." His friend jumps up, grabs his rifle. Ian grabs a shotgun because he had it right inside the door. And so they come back outside, and he was like, "It was right over there." And they're looking around, right? They're not seeing anything. So they go over to the brush, and they're walking this brush line that's not too far from the cabin, maybe 15, 20 feet. They're both walking back and forth looking for signs of this thing. They came back together. They're talking, "Hey, I don't see it," or whatever. They turn to go back to the cabin, and they see the top of its head just over the eave on the back side, right? So at their angle, it wasn't at the peak of this roof. It was just off the eave, off to the side. They saw the top of his head, and they were like, "Oh." So they came a big circle around to give distance, and they're aiming their guns over off to the side. And this thing was looking in the window, and they're watching it. And he said its head, he guesstimated that the eave came down to about 10 foot off the ground, and this thing was hunched down to look in the window, and they saw it taller than 10 feet, right? He said he stood there in awe, and they watched this thing. He said it was only a matter of seconds, but everything went slow motion, so it seemed like it was a long, drawn-out thing, but it was just seconds, right? But this thing was looking down in the window, turned and immediately looked at them, right? Looked at them, kind of squared up on them, and then turned around on a single pivot, turned around, and then walked to the back of the fucking cabin, turned left, and walked off out of view. So they're looking at the cabin straight on. This thing is right off to the right-hand side from, their point of view. It pivots, walks away, pivots, and then walks off to the left out of view, and then back into the brush. And he said that's when he lost it. He ran around and started firing shots out of the shotgun above the brush just to make noise, right? They didn't hear anything. They didn't hear it take off or any of that stuff. So they spent the rest of that time hyper paranoid about these things, and it never showed itself again. They would hear noises and assume it was it, right? I mean, of course, that's only natural when you're in the throes of terror like that. Every noise is gonna be the hairy man. You know what I mean? It's just whatever. But I want to thank Doug for getting Ian in touch with me, and I want to thank Ian for sharing that. And he sat on this since 1983. And I mean, my experience, I didn't share it for almost 20 years, so I get it. I'm still waiting to hear from witnesses of that opening sequence of that video where that thing's out in the open. Yeah, people are freaked out, man. Something like that coming out in broad daylight. What are you gonna do? Thankfully, it wasn't showing, as far as what was shared with me, any real signs of aggression. There's some other stuff I'm not going to elaborate on because I'm waiting for them. And then I'll, share that information. I want to say thank you to Dan for getting the word out on getting in contact with me and stuff. I appreciate you, Dan. And let's see. Oh, also, Adam Lima cleaned up that video and slowed it down. Then I had Squatch Bait help me further enhance it and get it formatted so I could share with you guys. Technology is a pain in the ass, man. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me, and we will catch you guys soon.